Welcome to the Effortless Swimming Podcast. My guest today is Brett Hawke. Brett, thanks for being on the podcast.
Yeah, Brenton, thanks for having me, mate.
You've been very busy the last 10 days or so, live streaming all of the footage from the Olympics. So, watched every race. Is there anything that stood out to you in terms of, you know a lot of the athletes there. You've probably spoken to a lot of them. What stood out to you? Was there any significant races for you?
Yeah, mate. I mean, there was a lot of great racing. I thought it was an excellent Olympics. You never know what you were going to get, coming off the year of training that a lot of these athletes had and the difficulties they faced. So in terms of how fast they'd swim, I think that was surprising. How deep it was going to be, I think that was surprising. And just the great racing. You know, I think that's the one thing you're never going to take away from us as humans is our ability to rise and compete. And, you know, when you put on your country's colours and a flag and your name on your cap, I mean, you're going to have epic battle. So I think we saw a lot of that. And there was a couple of surprises. Obviously, the first night, the men's 400 free, young kid, 18-year-old from Tunisia, I think surprised the whole world with his epic swim, winning from lane 8.
Have you heard much about him before that?
Nothing. Didn't even know he existed, you know, and saw him out in lane 8 and kind of made a bit of a joke of like, oh, this kid's going to win it from lane 8, and then all of a sudden he just kept going, and it was like, hang on, this thing turned from a joke to a reality real fast. So that was pretty epic to watch that. You know, watching Lily King get beat in the 100 breast to a young girl, Lydia Jacoby from out in Alaska. I mean, I thought that was an epic race, and to see Lily get beat, I was very shocked with that. And then, you know, look, there was great racing throughout. But you know, my boy that I coach, I had a personal side of it there as well. You know, Bruno Fratis in his third Olympics, swimming the 50 freestyle for the third time in the final. You know, finally getting on the podium and the emotions that came out from that, it was pretty epic to watch all that and be part of that, you know?
Yeah, how was it for you just watching that happen? Because, I mean, for him, it just looked like this meant the world to him. And obviously, you know, third time, he's 32 years of age to get his first medal then. How was it for you watching that?
Mate, it feels the same. Like I feel what he feels. You know, we're connected spiritually in that moment. You know, like you try and give them everything you can, but you can't swim the race for them. You know, and so you just have to sit back and watch it unfold, and just to see the outpouring of emotion for him and what it meant to him. We actually did a podcast today. And we talked about it, and I'm going to release it, and then it's something to share because I think it's a great story, but it's kind of what we all go through, you know. You know, you have success and failure, but ultimately, you know, a lot of what we do, you know, your identity gets wrapped up in that as well. And I think for him, he was never going to be fully satisfied with his life in general if he never got on the podium. I think there was always going to be something that, you know, he'd live with some sort of regret for the rest of his life if that didn't happen. So for him to fulfill that was pretty special.
And what about for you going from a competitive swimmer, an elite swimmer, to then coaching? How did your perhaps perspective change, or what was different for you going from being a competitor to then coaching? Because I think what I found when I started coaching is you obviously see a very different side of it, and I guess you've got a broader view of things, but when you're in there and you're training, it's just single focus, and you don't really get to take a step back and get a look at the bigger picture on a lot of occasions.
Yeah, I always felt like I was the one that was sacrificing the most as an athlete. Like, you know, like you're so self-centered. You're like, I'm the one doing this. It's me, 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 me. And then when you become a coach, you realize how much your coaches actually put into it and sacrifice. And, you know, you as an athlete, you go in, you work hard for a couple of hours, you go home, and you kind of switch off. Coaches never get to switch off. They're always thinking. They're always feeling. They're always preparing, you know, the next workout. And they've got multiple athletes to think about. So when I started coaching, I just went back and started picking up the phone and calling all my old coaches and thanking them, like, hey, I'm so sorry. I just didn't get it, So, I've got a lot more appreciation for the work that coaches put into this, and I've had moments where it's been, so fulfilling for me, and then I've had moments where it's been completely draining, and I've wanted to take a step back from it. And, the Aussies right now are in lockdown, coming back from Tokyo. They've got a 2-week quarantine up in Darwin. I think it's kind of a blessing in disguise for some of the coaches to be able to just decompress. It's very emotional to go through an Olympic cycle and then also to go through what they just went through, the most successful team in Australian swimming history. So I've been able to chat with a couple of them in quarantine and hearing them just feeling like it's been a blessing to just kind of decompress.
Yeah. It's I spoke to Kim Alberton, the Aussie distance swimmer, yesterday, and she was sort of saying similar thing. It's like it's really quite weird to go from the biggest moment in your life for a lot of them to then just like pretty much isolation essentially.
Yeah.
But that's can be quite good. How did you go as a swimmer, going from those big meets to those real highs to then coming off the back of it, like in terms of motivation, in terms of going all this fanfare to then pretty quiet? How'd you balance that?
Yeah, it's tough, mate. Whether you have success or you feel like you fail in some respects, I think there's a period of time where you just need to just stop and let it go. Whether it is the crazy success or the failure, it's like you've just got to decompress. You got to let it go, and then for me, it was always like a 3 or 4 week period where I was like, all right, I don't want to think about it. And then coming at the back end of that, then I'd start to think, all right, before my thoughts disappear, I need to write this down. What did I learn? How could I improve? And then it was like, okay, I'm ready to get back into it now. But I certainly needed that month away just to let all that stuff go. And sometimes with disappointment, it's hard. It's like you want to get straight back into it and get going again. But I think, especially off an Olympic cycle, you've got to take time to decompress.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, being a part of the 2000 Olympic team, it seems as though in terms of some of the success and then perhaps some of the culture of the Australian team, what we've got now was very similar to what happened 21 years ago. Have you sort of seen that comparison, or have you sort of thought about that?
Yeah, look, I think it certainly helps when you have talent. I've been part of teams as a coach where I've things are running so smoothly because you've got all the talent in the world. And back in 2000, with the talent we had on that team, from the top down, it was stacked. I was the fastest swimmer in Australia, and I wasn't even, a highly regarded swimmer on that team. It was like we had all these superstars. So, we went through a period where we lost some of that talent, and I think now where, as you can see, the women's team especially is completely stacked. The men are coming into their own. They're starting to get that talent back. I just think they went through a period of time where you gotta wait for that talent to emerge again, and now it just seems like there's a plethora of wealth of talent in Australia right now, and they're making the most of it.
Yeah, you're right. It certainly helps. I mean, all it takes is a couple of amazing swimmers on your team. You got Titmus, you got McKeon, and that alone, it's like so many gold medals there, right? And that could be the difference between being the worst Olympics ever to the best one ever.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
all it takes sometimes.
Exactly. And look at the US teams, in the past. They're always riding one particular athlete. Like even this year, Caleb Dressel winning 5 gold. Previously it's been Michael Phelps that's been winning multiple. So, it's not the whole team that ever, at the US level, they're not all winning gold medals, but, they have a couple of athletes that have always done really well. And I think that's what Australia has done this time round too, is like, look, it wasn't like the whole team swam extraordinarily well, but certainly a good proportion of the team came away with some medals, and I think that was super cool to see. Yeah.
Watching Dressel swim, like in the relays at the start, it was swimming well, but not outstanding in the relays in the beginning. I thought, okay, this will be interesting because From the 2019 World Champs, he dominated, or he was dominating. So maybe it was like late 2019, and then I was thinking, okay, we'll see what happens, at the Olympics. But then he worked into the meet and he swam incredibly well.
Yeah, well, I've been fortunate enough to know Caleb, since he was in high school. I actually recruited him to try and come and swim for me. I went to his house and had dinner with his parents a couple of times and basically begged him to come swim for me. But he ended up picking Florida. And look, so I've seen him from a young kid all the way to now. And I knew what he was capable of. I knew what he was potentially going to do. And, I was preparing an athlete to beat him. But, I know Caleb's talent. And once he gets going, once he does get on a roll, he's very, very difficult to stop. And I think we saw that in Tokyo.
Yeah, it's just incredible. And to get that world record too in the 100 fly. I think we only saw three world records. Well, not only, but to have one of those was pretty special, especially on the second last day.
Yeah, I was actually disappointed he didn't get the 100 freestyle and the 50, That's an old athlete of mine, Cesar Cielo. I coached him in 2008. He broke the world records in 2009, and so I want those world records to go. And they came close. Him and Kyle Chalmers both came real close in the 100, but I certainly felt like they're capable of getting that 100 freestyle world record. I think it was a tense, action-packed 100, but at some point soon, when they get a chance, I think both those guys will knock that off.
Yeah. They're swimming so fast and they're so close to it, so it's going to be good to see what happens there. Yeah. And with you're a sprinter. You work with a lot of the best sprinters in the world. What are some of those things that you would say kind of like the fundamentals of sprinting? Some of those things that you try and pass on to the athletes that you work with.
Look, the first thing is with sprinting is if you want to race fast, you've got to train fast. There used to be, like when I trained back in Australia, we used to do a lot of threshold sets. I never do threshold with my sprinters anymore. Like that's a thing that used to be a big chunk of my training that is completely eliminated these days. So, guys that used to swim 22 seconds in the 50 and 40, 49s, 48 highs. Now everybody's swimming 21 in the 50 and everybody's swimming 47 in the 100. So it's like training has shifted and it's changed. So, everybody's training fast now. So that's an essential element is like you've got to go fast in training. Recovery is a huge part of sprinting. It's the same thing. If you want to build muscle, you've got to recover. And then you've got to come back and work the muscle again, and then you've got to recover again. It's the same with speed. If you want to get faster, you've got to hit the speed, and then you've got to allow it time to rest and recover so that it can come back. It's like a building block. You're slowly building blocks. And that's what I do with my sprinters is, at the start of the season, they're not very strong and powerful and fast, and so we're trying to build strength. We're trying to build power, explosiveness. And these are things that you can improve over time. You can get more explosive. You can get stronger. Obviously, you can hold a lot more water in your training. You can improve your kick. You can improve your pull. These are variables that you can manipulate, and that's what we do. Is we look at, all right, what does it take to swim a really fast 50? What are the components of a fast 50? And where in those components do I need certain attributes? Where do I need to be explosive? Where do I need endurance? Because you need endurance at the end of a 50. When you're going at 21 speed for the first 35, it's very easy to shorten up. It's very easy to get out of your technique and break apart and fall apart. And so that's where the endurance factor comes into speed. Speed endurance is a huge part of our training. And so we look at all these elements and we kind of build. It's like building a race car. We build the perfect race car, and hopefully at the end it's got the most horsepower. It's got the best frame, and it can hold itself together. So, ultimately we're always trying to get faster. We never get to a point where we think, all right, that's the top end of our speed. We're always like, all right, how can we get faster? And so that's why, for me, it's like I'm looking at those world records and I'm thinking, I want to go beyond that. I know where we've been, but I want to go here. And so it's like, how do we get there? So part of it is exploratory. We're still exploring. but there's also parts, like you said, where you've got to have those parts in your training.
It's what I've really enjoyed post, I think, what was it, 2011, when they got rid of the suits. Like, to see those world records eventually getting knocked down, those old suit records, it's like, all right, and previously in 2011, I was like, man, there's no way that they're going to be able to beat these world records without the suits. It's just it's not going to happen. But then it's finding different ways, finding ways to do it better, improve their technique, and a lot of those world records have gone. There's not too many standing, is there?
No, and there's a psychological part to that too. A lot of people, when we were breaking world records, people were saying, "Oh, they'll never get to those world records." But my take on that was, well, we've seen humans do it, whether they're in a suit or not. We've still seen it with our own eyes, so it's possible. So even removing the suit, it still should be. I've seen somebody swim 46 in the 100. I know what it looks like. I know it's humanly possible as well. So once you have somebody break a barrier, it doesn't matter what the barrier is. Once you see it happen, people tend to flock to the mean. They get closer and closer, and that's what we're seeing. I mean, we just saw a 16-year-old boy swim 47.3 in the 100 freestyle, a few weeks ago. It's like, if a 16-year-old boy can do it, that fast, then, a man can swim 46 something soon. So it's coming, and we're figuring it out.
Yeah, there's some exciting talent coming through. I mean, watching Popovich swim, watching the South Korean swimmer. Geez, he just died that last 50 of the 200, but took it out with such speed. Yeah. And it's exciting to see what's coming down the pipeline. And I mean, you had a brief chat to Popovich. I don't know how much you spoke about this on it, but from what I sort of read, he's been training in he was training in a 33-meter pool, average blocks. He started out in very humble beginnings, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I would think so. I haven't gone too deep into it. I only had about 8 minutes with him, so I certainly want to go longer and extend next time we speak, but and dig into all that. But there are people out in the world that don't put limitations on themselves. We tend to put limits on ourselves. But people that have less than us sometimes figure out ways. And I think kind of that's been the story in COVID too. Is like when we've had these lockdowns. Like I was even training, a guy. I'm sure you know the story, Cody Simpson. I was training him. Here's this musician, coming from music, hadn't really swum in 10 years. And we go into a lockdown situation, we have to figure out how to swim fast, under really harsh circumstances. So we did it. Multiple other people did it. I'm sure that you had your challenges doing what you were doing. So I think you just figure it out and adapt, Yeah,
exactly. And thinking, what have been some of your favourite? What are some of your favourite things about coaching? What do you really get a kick out of?
Oh, that's a good question. I really enjoy watching people maximize their potential. Whatever that potential is. I get a kick out of people breaking their own personal barriers. I do like high-end performance. I love the top-end swimming. For me, I'm an Olympic coach, and I always will be. I'll never coach club. It's just I do clinics now, and I go around and I teach young kids, but it's not something that I'm passionate about. I'm passionate about high-level swimming, and so I do like working with professional athletes. I like the professional mindset. It's probably why I love Bruno so much, and we have such a great relationship, is because he does have such a professional mindset. So for me, the top end of the sport is really exciting. I love competing for Olympic medals. That's the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning. To be the best in the world is something really special for me. And it's not for everybody. I'm not saying everybody has to have that approach, but I certainly love competing for world championships and Olympic medals for sure.
I think I remember hearing a story. You might have told on one of your podcast episodes, but I think it was at one of the meets. It was like maybe Pan Packs or something, where you might have said to Grant Hackett, you were feeling like he wasn't fired up going into the 1500, and so you said that the US guys they were talking about this is going to be their meet. and I think, as an athlete, that's it's a really good way to fire people up. But as a coach, like I find that you can sort of press the right buttons if you know the swimmer well enough. You know the right buttons to press, especially those that are so competitive. It's you can find ways to really cheer them up. So is that would you be able to go back to that story and what happened there?
Yeah, listen, mate, the psychology of the sport to me is huge. And, even Bruno, when I was talking to Bruno today about him in the ready room at the Olympics, he could tell who he was going to beat and who was going to be tough. Like you know who you've got a mental edge over, and other ones that are like, okay, this guy's switched on. But in terms of the Grant Hackett story, it was just like we have a very close relationship. We were roommates on occasion on the Australian team, so I had seen him and the way that he had approached his racing, and he was just very fatigued at the end of a long couple of weeks of racing. And we're at the Pan Pacs. He was racing the Americans. He hadn't been beaten in something like 6 years at the time, and so I knew I was seeing something that was a little bit unusual in him, like fatigue and a different type of mindset where he was kind of being a little bit negative. And so you just use your coaching skills, at that point. And this was when I was a swimmer on the team, so I was already starting to coach back then. So, and I think that's what I love about coaching is the psychology, the mental side of it. Like I don't think we're really figured out, the space between our ears right here. Like there's so much power in here, and so I just used manipulation on Grant to kind of get the best out of him. Told him the Americans. I was listening to them on the bus, and they were talking about him and saying how they were going to beat him, and that just got under his skin. Like it was easy. It's easy to figure out what gets under Grant Hackett's skin. Just talk about Americans and being beat, and that's the end of it. It's like, so yeah, I think that's what you do with your athletes is you try and find what really motivates them, what really is going to get them fired up, because you want athletes to feel like they're invincible. Like you want them to feel like they're unbeatable, and if you can pull that out of them, then you're going to get some extraordinary performances. And Grant ended up, winning that race by half a pool length and swimming the second fastest time he'd ever swum. Whereas minutes earlier he's completely exhausted on the massage table and out of it. So yeah, it's pretty extraordinary what we can get out of ourselves when we really start to use the power of our brain. Yeah,
that's it. Has there been any stories from chatting to some of the swimmers or coaches that you've had on your podcast that you didn't know and you were like, oh, that's such an amazing, such an interesting story that you'd never heard before?
Oh, mate, you put me on the spot now. There's so many of them. And I think that's the thing that I love about talking to all the different athletes is like everybody's got a story, and I'm kind of excited to talk to some of the people that just went through Tokyo, and like get some of their stories. And because I'm just a fan, like this is the first time I hadn't been to the Olympics in 5 Olympics, or I'd been to 5 in a row, so this was going to be number 6 for me, and I opted not to go. I wanted to be kind of a spectator and look at it from the other side on this one. So yeah, I just sat back as a fan and watching. I'd love to speak to Ariane Titmus and try and get in her head in terms of racing a girl or a woman like Katie Ledecky, who's virtually unbeatable, and racing her at the Olympic Games and then beating her in that stage. Like, to me, like that's an incredible story. I want to get to the bottom of that one, So I've been fortunate to talk to a number of people on my podcast, and everybody's got their own little unique story about how they got to where they were, kind of thing. So I wish I could remember something very specific, but like I talked to Emma McKeon 10 months ago. At that stage, 10 months ago, Emma McKeon had never won an individual Olympic gold medal. She'd won relay medals before. She'd won individual medals at the Olympics, but she'd never won an Olympic gold. And I think this time she came away with, something like, maybe 3 individual gold, I believe. And she certainly won a couple of relays as well. So, to see someone like that who 10 months ago had never won an individual gold, now she's won it. It's nice to go back and compare it'll be interesting to hear what she said back then to now. So, yeah, I love the stories.
I think that's a great story, isn't it? Like, to someone who's been in the sport for a long time, and then to become the best in the world in that later stage in her career, where she was up there, but she was never a standout or anything like that. But she just fired from trials onwards. She just looked like she had so much speed. And was there anything that's like, in terms of her training? From what I heard, she had reduced it to like 5 or 6 swim sessions a week, and had upped her gym. Have you heard anything along those lines of what she'd been doing? And I guess you're going to talk to Bowley after this, so he'll probably talk about that.
I'm going to talk to Bowley in about an hour from now, so I'm going to get to the bottom of it for sure. But she did say that she had worked on her strength. She's getting stronger, and I think that's a hallmark of a great champion is figuring out, where are my weaknesses. Like, where am I? I think a lot of people go through their career and they just do the same thing over and over again, and they expect different results. Where I think champions are like, kind of do the same thing that I did at the end of you have this decompressing part, and then you have this assessment of like, all right, where have I got to get better, in order to either compete for medals or to compete to be the best, and that's one thing that I always tried to do in my career, is just figure out where's my weaknesses. And I think probably Emma is a great example of saying, well, I got to get stronger if I want to be a champion, and she's done that. Yeah.
And just going back to when you first started coaching, like, you've sort of coached under, or like Richard Quick, Dave Marsh, like you've sort of been there with some of the best coaches in the world. What kind of when you first started coaching, what sort of coach did you feel like you were going to be? Like, what kind of style? And then did that change at all with those who you coached under, or those that you worked with?
Yeah, it's a good question. I never really intended to be a coach. I kind of fell into it under David Marsh. He kind of pulled me into it, and then I just realized pretty early on that I had a talent for it. Honestly, I think one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted my athletes to know that they had a partner, that I was with them in their performance. It wasn't just like me preparing them and then me standing on the sideline. I didn't want that separation. I wanted it to be like, hey, we're partners here. I watch a lot of UFC now, and I see the fighters coming into the ring, and their coaches are right there with them, and they stand right up against the cage, and they're shouting out details to the fighters as they're fighting. That's the kind of coach I want to be, like, I want to be that person that walks to the cage with the swimmer, and for them to know that, hey, when you get punched, I get punched. When you throw a punch, I throw a punch. It's like, I want that personal connection, and that's the type of coach that I've tried to be, and I feel like I'm pretty successful at that. It certainly has helped that I came from a very high-end type background where I was an Olympic swimmer myself. So, like, I think trust was easy to build, because they're like, oh yeah, you get it, you understand what I'm going through. So, but I'm very big on the psychology too. So for me, a workout is a workout. It's how you apply the workout. It's how you perform in the workout. And those things require both a physical and a mental approach to training that then translates into racing. So, like, if I'm energized before practice and during practice, then my athletes are going to be energized. When they walk in and they sense my energy, then they can feed off that energy. When they see me running up and down the pool deck next to them as they're swimming, they're going to feed off that. It's very much kind of like a Dean Boxall approach. I can see a lot of similarities with him and myself in the way that he invests in his athletes, is you pour everything into it and you're there with them, and they've got a partner.
I remember hearing Bill Sweetenham say something along the lines of, as a swim coach, you go in full to the brim with energy and you leave completely wiped, and then your swimmers come in low energy and they leave completely pumped up. It's and you really feel that after like a really good session. Like, you, as a coach, you're exhausted, but the swimmers are on a high, and they feel like they've really got a lot from it. And I took a lot from that. Whereas I think particularly at the start when I started coaching, it's like I'd sometimes feel like I would just put too much into it, where I'd just be too wiped at the end of a session in a way. It's like, all right, got to get back up for another one.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are multiple times where I'd come home and I'd just be exhausted, and my wife at the time would be like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, really? Like, do you understand what I just did out there? It's like I just poured every ounce of energy I had into that, and that can be tough, in terms of coaching. That's what gave me an appreciation for the coaches that I had. I never fully realized that they'd go home just wiped out, so, it's a tough profession.
I remember, my dad was my coach for the majority of when I was swimming, and as a teenager, you've got everything provided for you. You don't need to drive, you don't need to feed yourself. It's everything's done for you. And so I remember, my dad, he was working full time. He was coaching 7 or 8 sessions a week, and would sometimes get a little bit frustrated, as a coach, and at the time I was like, just chill out. I think it's easy. I don't know. I can't see why you might be a little bit frustrated with things. But then as a coach or as a parent, you've got all these responsibilities. It's like it takes a lot to just keep you cool sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes I didn't handle that as well as I could have, and you're like, all right, you got to learn from that, But it's tough when you're doing 10 workouts a week and they're just back to back. And the hard thing for me in the US, in the university system, is we'd go through the whole college system and then we'd go through the international season, and the international season would then back up into the college season. Then you just go again. So it was like Groundhog Day. Every year was just the same thing, and we never got any breaks. I didn't take a holiday in 10 years, and so I by the end of it, I just got burnt out on that.
Yeah, I think it's great to see. To see so much of Dean Boxall and Ariane, that relationship together, some of the Swim Australia stuff that they did with the Mic'd Up series, and seeing that relationship and how he coaches. I think it's so good for the sport on many levels. You've got parents looking in with their kids, wouldn't that be an awesome thing for my kid to be a part of? You've got coaches looking in, majority of coaches looking in going, that's a passionate coach, I can take something from it. I think that insight into it and what we've seen recently is going to be really beneficial over the next couple of years.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's been good. We all saw the way he reacted after the win, and it kind of went viral, but when you back it up with all the other stuff that he's done with the mic'd up stuff, like you said, when you take the time to watch and listen, that's a guy, that's a coach, and that's a relationship that they're invested in each other's performance, Dean is just in that performance. And so a lot of emotions flood out when you're that emotionally invested into it, So, a lot of respect for what they did.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know you've got a busy schedule, so Brett, I want to thank you for being on the podcast. What's maybe one of the last things is what are you most looking forward to in the next 6 to 12 months? Because you've got a lot on your plate, but what are you looking forward to?
You know what? I didn't really know where I was going before COVID hit, and I think when COVID hit, it made me reevaluate a lot of things, and it made me realize that I can put my energies in certain areas, and that's what I've done. I put my energy into coaching a couple of athletes privately. I put my energy into my podcast, and I got a lot of success from that. Coaching Cody Simpson was very fulfilling. Coaching Bruno Fraudis has been very fulfilling into the Olympics. Doing my podcast and sharing stories from swimmers and coaches around the world, and so I'm just going to keep exploring that, mate. I'm passionate about swimming. I love the sport. I love the people in it. I love the stories. And like I said, I'm very into the high-end type performance of it, so I'm just going to keep sharing those stories. And so I don't know where it's going to go. We just started a live show. We're going to do a weekly live show on swimming, and I think what you're doing with your podcast and your platform, it's exciting to see people doing the things that we're doing. So I'm just going to keep exploring this platform and see where it takes us.
Yeah, well, I think you're doing an amazing thing for the swimming community as a whole. Speaking to my dad last week, and he said, we were talking about the Australian swim team and what Lee Nugent went through in 2012, and then to see the success of the team now. And he was saying it'd be amazing to just sit down with Lee and just listen to his stories and see what he's he's seen and gone through. And I feel it's very much like what you're doing with your podcast, is you're drawing these stories out of people that we wouldn't otherwise hear. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think your podcast has blown up over the last 12, 18 months with the guests you've had. I think the way that you interview and you draw those questions out of people, it's amazing to hear them. So as a swimmer and a swim fan, it's like I love what you're doing. So thanks for doing the podcast. It's Inside with Brett Hawke. For those that are listening, if you haven't heard it yet, but we'll be sure to link to it in the show notes. And keep it up. It's unreal.
Branton, you're a good man, mate. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Brett.
Take care.